Good evening. Welcome. Welcome to the American Library. My name is Jim Allen. I am the library director here at the library. Today we have a rare treat. We have Jordan Fitch, all the way from the Pacific Northwest, as a local author. So Jordan Fitch is a native New Hampshireite whose life and storytelling are shaped by a deep well of experience and curiosity. Former U.S. Marine, he traveled the world before earning a B.S. in electrical engineering. After nearly 2 decades in New York, he now resides in the Pacific Northwest, where he continues to write with intense. Jordan is the author of 2 acclaimed thrillers, The Cardinal and Name Both are over here. They've captivated readers and sparked conversation in book clubs, interviews, and podcasts. His work blends razor-sharp plotting with emotional depth, exploring the shadows of human motivation and fragility of truth. Everyone, please give a hand for Jordan.
Quite the intro. Thank you, Jim. And thanks for making this beautiful space available. It's a really a remarkable library for here in the Upper Valley. And thank you all for coming. This is I'm kind of blown away by all the folks who showed up. You know, faces that I haven't seen for years, and a lot of good friends and neighbors and family. So thank you all for showing up. This is kind of my end of my July book event schedule, and it's been quite a remarkable month this July. I've had a few big events, you know, starting back on the West Coast in Washington. I had my first Barnes & Noble book signing in Vancouver, Washington, and then the Northwest Book Fair. I was a author there at the National Historic Site of Fort Vancouver, where we had 60 authors and thousands of attendees. So that was a big event there. So I had that in Washington, and then here in New Hampshire. So I'm very precise with my words here. So I'm calling this my coast to coast book tour because I have to be precise with my words. And I've also had a couple of meetings with not meetings, but just kind of gatherings I've had with other authors. You know, being in that community is really remarkable. Just in that community, it feels like everyone's a writer because I'm friends with a lot of folks like that, a lot on social media. But I got the chance to meet a few different groups in person too, which was really nice. And that's something to not just see people online, but to meet them in person and share some drinks and talk and everything like that. So that's been over the last few months too. So I've had a lot of author related things going on recently, which has been really fantastic. One of the things that we talk about is I'm friends with these authors, but at some level we're competitors. We're all trying to sell our books, all trying to reach the similar markets, especially if we're writing in similar genres and things like that. But it's all friendly competition, and it's a super supportive community. But one of the topics that comes up is because we are trying to reach readers and that it's hard to break through everything else that's going on. The book market can seem like it's saturated. There's so many books published every year and only so many books read every year. So that's a pretty simple equation. You got the numerator, how many books are published, how many books are out there, and then the denominator, how many readers there are. So that's something that we look at ways to try to increase that readership, because it's here in the U.S. in a lot of looking at the culture as a whole is half people don't read. They read one or fewer books per year. So I think there's a lot of room to work on that denominator, that lower number, to get more people into reading and kind of see the benefits and what they can learn and become by reading, especially reading more fiction. But that's me as somebody trying to sell books. Why of course I'm going to want more readers, right? So why do books matter more than other types of businesses, because at one level, book selling is another business trying to make a profit, trying to sell more books. So how is it different than like somebody like a hat maker who wants to have promote a culture where more people wear hats just so they can sell? What makes books a different entity in that space and in our culture? If you look at the study after study, certainly anecdotal evidence in my life from the people I know, there's the highest correlation in like the highest activity habit that people have that correlates with happiness, with success, with stable relationships, with compassion, with empathy, is reading. Like that's what really changes people as they read. They look at that and by spending the time with novels, fiction, following a character's journey, through stories, and taking the time that a novel requires to read and digest that information, that allows for a connection that doesn't really happen anywhere else. Even like movies or TV shows, they're quicker and there's often distractions, but like with a book, it kind of forces you to focus on the journey of the characters and kind of really understand that. And I think that's what really drives the empathy that can come from deep reading and from exposing yourself to different people and cultures that you can get with books. But why is that? Why is like if you read, and I'm sure some of you have, if you read a book like American Dirt, or you read like The Beekeeper of Aleppo, or you read The Grapes of Wrath, I mean, that's going to affect, for me anyway, speaking for myself, I can empathize with those characters. And like those three examples, that's all the same story. They're different culture, different time, different places, but it's all the same story. It's a parent making impossible decisions, facing nearly insurmountable odds and peril at every turn for the hope of getting somewhere better for their family. It's the same story. So, going through a book like that and reading those, for me, you can emphasize and the connection that we have. Like me, I'm pretty far removed from a journey like any of those folks faced, but like it allows me to have that empathy for the characters going through that. Looking at a topic like immigration as a whole. I mean, pick any modern contentious topic, and there's going to be fiction books, not just fiction, but also like memoirs or histories that are written with a fictional arc versus like a encyclopedia entry, like a news article type thing. It really takes that fictional arc of following a character's journey and getting invested in that type of story that can really drive that empathy, which is more than just listening and understanding, but really feeling what people like that are feeling. And I think that's something that books can really provide. And any given topic, there are fiction books that can open people's eyes. And I haven't seen numbers, but I imagine there's pretty high correlation from people who have read books like that and kind of think about that when they go to vote, when they go to be involved with their community, when they when they interact with other people. So there really is that opportunity that books are unique in providing. But again, why is that? Why are books able to sort of make those deeper connections? And I think that gets to looking at our history as humanity. I mean, we're storytellers. We evolved telling stories around campfires, giving like to listen to oration in public squares, where these epic journeys, these stories, these narrative arcs that are out there that have something of a beginning, middle, and end that people can identify with and sort of have a connection to, and they can relate their own lives to. Something that we have had that's in our psyche. Myths and folklore, religion. That's all part of an arc that is ingrained into how we think, how our brains are wired, and that's not something we do much anymore. It's not something that is common for most people. Everything's quick snippets of information. We have a lot of things that are called stories. We have Instagram stories. We have Facebook stories. Every company page has an our story page on their company website that you can look at, and those are snippets of information that are devoid of context and devoid of connection that tie past, present, future together. And if that's all we're seeing, and at such a rapid pace that everything comes in, that we don't make those connections, we don't have a chance to reflect and to absorb stories that we have, to tie them, use critical thinking, use our own memories, use our own experiences to evaluate what we're seeing. That we did have, if a story was told in the evening, and you would have time to think about it. If a story was told in a public square, and it was just had the time to focus, to do that. I think books come closest to that now in modern society, where you have to sit down and spend the time with the characters, with the journey, and reflect it against your own experience and your own journey, and you get that much deeper connection that you just don't get with the quick snippets of information that are devoid of context and devoid of like they're typically devoid of compassion. They may seem like it'll elicit emotions, and it certainly does. Certainly a lot of these Facebook stories, news stories, they do elicit emotions, but they're not connected to a narrative arc that kind of brings us in. And that's something that we need, our psyches need, based on how human history has been. And that's something that is hard to hard to gain, but it takes a concerted effort to look at that. And like so things like that fill the gap, because because we seek out those type of arcs, and we seek out that connection to a bigger whole, with a past and with a hopeful future. That all these quick snippets that we don't even have a chance to absorb or understand come in. And so what fills the gap? It's like the quick social media stories, conspiracy theories. Conspiracy theories are awesome at filling that gap, our need for connection and explanation and understanding. That's why conspiracy theories work so well now, is because conspiracy theories tell a story. It doesn't matter if it's true, it doesn't matter if it makes sense, but it fills that need that we have to connect, past, future, and gives explanations that we crave, even if they're completely farcical. So it's there's that presence there, but every the short-term like snippets of information that we're getting, whether they're coming from media personalities, or social media, they're all selling something. If they're coming from companies, they're all selling something. They're trying to elicit emotions to get you to pay, whether it's buying a product, whether it's voting. Politicians are great at telling stories. Again, whether or not they're true, they're great at telling stories and kind of eliciting those emotions that we respond to and can identify with and can connect with. Again, whether or not they're true, that's something that's intrinsic in how we think, how our brains process. That it's easy to get attracted to a politician's quick story that they put out there and identify with it, because we don't have that wider arc that allows us to take separation, take distance, step back, and kind of evaluate what we're seeing, tie it to past, future. I mean, there's not much past that we retain much anymore too, because like memory, like that's another thing that's kind of really eroding, because we don't commit things to memory based on experiences. We'll record 1,000 photos on a vacation, but that's just snippets of information that doesn't connect to the whole, doesn't connect to the arc of our personal narrative that we're telling. And then have those there, and we don't think about where where's the deeper connection, where's the feeling that we had from these experiences, because say, oh, it's all recorded. We don't even need to think about it because I can go back and and recollect that information whenever I want because it's all digitized there. But again, that's just like snippets of information. It doesn't convey the journey that we went through at that point. So yeah, I think that books are a way to come closer to closing that gap, to fill that need that we have for an arc of a story, that a narrative that's intrinsic to the human condition. And so it's something that I think can be helpful. More people, like my example about the books about immigration earlier, if more people read those books, I think there would be more empathy that would affect community action. It would affect voting. It would affect public policy. And that's really the bereft of empathy that we have. And books can do a huge part in closing that gap and kind of building a better society. I get a lot out of books, obviously, and I hope you all do too. But just some kind of thoughts about what where I think books are in society and what role they can have based on what we're where we are and where we could be. So anyway, that's that. I wrote a couple books. I started this journey a couple years ago, about 4 years ago, and I've always wanted to write. I started a couple books in high school that I never finished. I've always read a lot, and it's just always been a great way to just connect to that author, have that conversation with authors is really what reading is, because everybody reads a book differently. Everybody has a different personal connection with what they read and get something different out of it. And I've always really loved that that experience of trying new authors, going back to favorite authors, and that was something. Hi there. And and that was something that got some critters out here you might want to take care of. I didn't really have space in my life until about 4 years ago when I wanted to really take that journey. I had some ideas bouncing around in my head, things I read, things I've been thinking about, and like, this can make a pretty cool story. So my first book is The Cardinal Line. I read a lot of Michael Crichton. I read a lot of Neil Stephenson. He's not as well known, but they both write like thrillers that have some sort of scientific principle. And I kind of love that exciting story, but I'm also learning things at the same time. I want to learn when I read. So there's a few different like scientifically plausible concepts that I have in there that kind of makes for a fast-paced thriller. There's still character-driven. It's still a character-driven book where the characters are the ones who propel the plot forward. But there's some I think pretty interesting scientific principles kind of woven in there that help to drive the plot forward. So I released that in November of 2023. I was really blown away by all the reviews, all the reception, that people have gotten for that. And then I moved on to Nametown. That was just released a few months ago, and it's an entirely different story. They're both standalone, but that's an entirely different story. But it's still a fast-paced thriller where it's character-driven. This is more small town and tied into history, whereas The Cardinal Line is more on the scientific edge. This is like small town history, some dark secrets, and the characters. The similarity with both, which I think is as I write more, I think the type of space that I like to write in is having protagonists who are being pursued for some reason that they don't quite understand, and they have to learn what it is that people want from them, or why they want them gone, as they're evading them. So there's information that the protagonists don't have, and I write from strictly from the protagonist's POV. So like we don't have the other side of the story that comes in as the protagonist learns it. I want the reader to kind of be in the protagonist's shoes rather than having like the bad guy have a POV too. So there's I just enjoy that type of writing, and that type of withholding of information, which makes for the suspense of the mystery for the reader, to experience it as closely as the protagonist could. There's a lot of different styles. That's not at all the right way. There is no right way. Everybody writes differently and writes wonderful books in any variety of POV schemes, and there's a lot of variety. That's a whole separate topic, but that's just kind of the books that I like to write, where it's fast paced. The Cardinal line, the whole book takes place in about a week and a half. The story within the book, as they find out things about history, goes back a few generations. And then Nametown, the whole book takes place in 8 days, the actual plot of the book, but it ties into events 200 years ago. So kind of goes back and forth to that. So yeah, I'm working on another one too. I want to write a series next, so that's something that I'm working on. So it'll probably be a while before I have another one out, because I want to actually draft 3 books before I go back and work on the first one, just for consistency and to kind of get to know the characters better. I think one advantage of writing a series is you have to get to know the characters once, and then you can reuse those characters. It saves a lot of time. Whereas the standalone ones, a lot of the times just kind of getting to know the characters and kind of where they are and how they fit into the story. So, and I think a series will be fun. I kind of have the books plotted out. I just need to get the time to get the the draft through, and then through from there. But yeah, so yeah, I think that's about all I have. I'll be here. I'll be happy to answer any questions for the group. If you have questions later, if you would like to pick up a book, that would be awesome. I see some in the audience there, so I'd be happy to sign those as well. But yeah, I really appreciate everyone coming. Yeah, this is a great turnout, so super happy with that. So yeah, please. Okay.
Question about each book.
Sure.
So in terms of your background research, Cardinal line did have a lot of complex scientific stuff in it. I've never reading it thinking, where did he come up with this? Did you have to do a lot of background? Did you do a lot of background research, or did you just already know all that?
It's a combination of both. Yep. When I said I had some ideas bouncing around in my head, one of them was a concept of, and this is not really a spoiler alert, it comes out pretty early in the book for those who haven't read it, the concept of epigenetic inheritance, which is we all learn in school about DNA and how our genes are passed down through generations. Epigenetic inheritance is a new concept that hasn't really been fully studied yet, but has been proven in some levels, that our gene expression, so how our genes evolve as we live and grow based on environment and everything else, those can also be passed down through generations. Like those changes in your genome, based on your environment, not just the hard-coded DNA, but also changes can be passed down. So that could make a pretty cool story if I could get that. And I didn't see any other stories. There might be some out there, but I don't know of any that kind of use that as a concept. So that's why I kind of compared it to someone like Michael Crichton, where they take a scientific concept and they push it a little bit, but kind of stay within the realm of scientific plausibility. They don't, like not making the jump to like sci-fi. And some readers did think that was sci-fi, and that's fine. Like I said, everybody reads the book differently, but like my intention was to say, sort of, this side of scientific plausibility. Yeah.
Very complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's part of it, and then also not spoiler alert, because this is like explained earlier in the book, but the with the eyesight. So the subtle change in the visible spectrum that humans can see. That's something that goes back to 8th grade in Cornish. I did a science fair project on the electromagnetic spectrum, and so infrared is a part of that. The visible wavelength, and then the slightly longer wavelengths as you get to IR, the slightly shorter ones as you get into UV and things like that. So I remember I had the station set up at the Cornish Fair gym, and I was playing clips of The Predator because they have that infrared thing, which is not real at all, obviously, but I just I found that fascinating. So and because that we all see a little bit differently. It's not like a specific wavelength that everybody can see. Everyone is a little bit different, and then get into the animal kingdom is even more different. So it's I don't think it's too far of a stretch that something could be done to change that. And I won't say any more for spoiler alerts, but those two concepts are both ones that I had some prior knowledge of, but I certainly brushed up and looked for more information as I was doing research for the book.
And then on Nametown, did you come across the original story from 200 years ago? And that was a true incident.
Yes.
Was that what kind of then inspired you to write a story around that, or did that
it was more backwards. I wanted to write a small town story, whereas the Cardinal line took place all over New England, New York, Massachusetts, New Jersey. I wanted to have a similar story, but all contained within a small town. I had sort of the idea. I wanted again, not getting into spoiler territory too much, but the name town, the name of the book comes from a town that's facing a vote to rename their town based on a newly discovered sort of history there. I wanted that concept, what is going to fracture a town based on modern sentiment and identity, and renaming your town is probably going to get a lot of people up in arms. So that's the concept that I used as a base, and then based on a few different factors, I had to have it be in a certain place, and then once I had it in that area, I looked for historical events that were in that area that could have prompted that, and I came across this and read a couple books on the historical incident as well to kind of fuel that part of it. And it has journal entries. The journal entries are all fictional, and then but they tie into what I had read about that, and what the protagonist, or not the protagonist, I guess he almost be a antagonist, but from the historical perspective, what he may have been thinking and going through after his escape from that massacre. I try to do as much research as I can. Like I said, I love to learn when I read. I also love to learn when I write. So, yes.
So you mentioned speaking about how you writing and got better, which I find very interesting. Very good at bringing where it came from. No composites.
So nobody in particular. I don't have characters that said this person was inspired by this person directly, but certainly any interaction that I have, all of you could be culprit. It could be in my next book if you say something that I like that, or I don't like that. But certainly any interaction that I have, certainly my own experiences. I mean, I think it's pretty hard for any writer to write any convincing character that doesn't have at least some aspect of themselves in it too. Like looking at that, so I getting into a bit of the technical craft a little bit. There's like discovery writers and there's like outliners. So people who outline an entire book before they go and actually write the prose and the dialogue and everything, and have like step by step. And that's super successful for a lot of people. Some people are discovery writers. Another term for the same thing is plotters versus pantsers, people who plot and people who write by the seat of their pants. So same, and that's a spectrum. Everyone's somewhere along that spectrum. So I'm definitely more on the discovery side, where I'll have an idea, I'll kind of start writing and start fleshing out the characters, and then kind of see where they take me. It's as I'm writing, if I'm doing something that goes against what that character will do, they'll let me know pretty quickly, and because it's just not working and it's just not congruent with what has happened before. One method that I used, I actually didn't use it with Nametown, but with the Cardinal line, one method I used was to try to journal in the mind of the character. So just like do a few journals as Aaron or as Dane, and just kind of like free write, try to get into their mind, and in that process you can get some some nuggets that could be useful in the book somewhere. So, yeah. Yes.
You came from Cornish.
Yep.
And now you live in Washington?
Yes. Yep.
And how did that transition?
So I was in Cornish through high school, went to Hartford High School, and then I was in the Marine Corps. So the Marine Corps took me around, and then after I was done with that, I settled in New York State. I got a job. I did not have my electrical engineering degree at that point, but I had a lot of electrical technician experience from my time in the Marines. That was my job there. So I worked for a IBM foundry, so like working in the clean room foundry where they make the silicon wafers with all the computer chips, wearing the full white bunny suit and everything. So I did that for a few years, and then went back to school full time to finish my engineering degree, and then worked for a couple different. Yep, State University of New York. Yep, at New Paltz. So that's in the Hudson Valley. Oh, okay. Oh, wow. Okay. Awesome. I'll have to find out which one. Yeah. So I graduated there, and then went to work as a plant engineer at a zinc aluminum alloy foundry. So they melt down metal in huge furnaces that they send out to die casters to make everything that's die casted, like basically all the metal components around here. So I did that for a few years, and then I worked for Anheuser-Busch for a few years at their can manufacturing plant. This is in Newburgh, New York. And then I worked for my current company. I'm not a full-time author, not yet. We'll see where that goes. But I work for my current company, which is a pharmaceutical distribution company. And so I worked at a new site there in New York, and then moved into a different role that brought me out to the West Coast. The requirements for my new role were, because it's mostly a remote position, was I need to be somewhere on the West Coast and close to a major airport. So kind of a broad range of areas to move. Cassie, my sister, she's not here, but she and her family live out in the Columbia River Valley, in the Columbia River Gorge. Absolutely beautiful area. So we'd been out there to visit them. We love the area. We're close to Portland for travel, but it's a nice, quiet area with all the outdoor adventure type stuff that we love. So and close to family as well. So. Yep. State Council of the Arts is funded.
It just seems like somebody would snatch you up and then creative writing for
Yeah.
to bring science into that and help them develop a choice.
Yeah.
Some kind of problem.
I'd love to be part of that. But that's not something I've looked into.
Can I ask your parents?
Sure. I don't know, can they?
When you knew that he was interested, is there anything that happened at the same time as they prayed that said, our boy's gonna be a writer? He was writing on and off from high on, probably. Stories and he was writing anyway, but I didn't know he was book. My question is, where do you find the time?
That's a good question. So there's some pretty consistent advice from most well-established authors, is like Stephen King being one. He writes every day, right? Have a set block of time every day to write. That's pretty consistent advice that I absolutely do not follow, just because. So I will find time in the morning, in the evening, when I am free. Like for writing, like drafting, where I'm like getting down ideas, I typically need a couple hour block at least to make it worth it. If it's like 45 minutes, by the time I'm into it, I'm just not getting anywhere. For editing, it's a little different because I can take that in like smaller snips and do edits and kind of go through, depending on which level of editing I'm doing. But it's thanks to my wife for ensuring that I can get time for ensuring that I can get time, to like just sit and write, whether it's at home or just going to a cafe or something like that, and having those blocks. But that's something that I'm working on, is trying to carve out more consistent time, because that's definitely is gonna increase productivity and efficiency, and also the habits, the all important habits of writing at a certain time. So I'm kind of geared to do that. I'm not there now, but I'm trying to find ways to get there.
The
Yes.
So
Yeah.
that makes it easier, you don't have a deadline.
Right. Yeah. That's one big advantage of an independent author is that you're pretty much on your own deadline. You know, sometimes you are if you're working with editors and cover designers, if you're lining them up ahead of time. So there's plenty of self-published authors who have a more strict timeline because they have their editor blocked out for 3 months from now, so they need to get that. I'm just kind of going piece by piece. So I'm I can pretty much you know go with what makes sense for me, and I don't feel like I'm rushing. I think Peggy had a question. Oh, okay. Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Okay. 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 Thank you. Good. Oh, thank you. Okay. Oh, thank you. Okay. I think so. Yeah. Oh, thank you. I don't. So I have a cover designer, a cover artist, and so for these I've self-edited. Some people do work with editors. There's different stages. There's line development, um, copy editing. So there's like different stages of editing, and some people will work with each of the stages and kind of outsource that. Um, you know, software is pretty good. For like catching the obvious errors. Certainly not AI. Don't use AI at all. But just catching like the obvious spelling errors, and if there's some syntactical error that you know it'll highlight it for me. Then I'll have time to think about it. Like okay, do I want to break the rule here because this is the effect, this is the mood I'm going for, or do I want to go by the more traditional way of framing the sentence? Things like that. So I probably should hire an editor because there's always going to be more that I don't catch. When the Cardinal line first came out, there were a few typos there that I didn't catch, and I was able to change those pretty quickly. But there's several copies out there already that have the typos, but they're like minimal enough that I don't think people notice too much. But it's always something. I just want to make sure it's as clean as can be. And even people who do pay for editors, there's still plenty. I'm sure you've all read plenty of traditionally published best-selling books that have typos in them. It's just part of books. You put 100,000 words on paper, a couple of them aren't going to be right.
Is that how many words in?
Cardinal line is 82, and Nametown is 86,000.
So when you finish this book, you cannot let anyone else read it to make sure it makes sense. You're just out there.
So yes and no. With the Cardinal line, that was my debut. I said, okay, I just want this to be again, not good advice. I'm not good at taking advice from other authors, but as I learn things, so I didn't do. I just kept this to self-publishing or like self-editing, self-reviewing, and then published it. That did you read? Okay, that was like maybe at the end, but so I had one beta reader. So beta reading is when you send it out to a small group of people who are going to read it, provide feedback, for both typos and for plot holes, things they liked, things they didn't like, potential character motivation issues, things like that. So Lauren was my sole beta reader for the Cardinal line, and then I had a team of excellent beta readers, one of whom's in the room, and also Heather, Peggy's daughter, was on that team. So I had a family and friends, about 10, 11. I think I sent out to 12 and got responses from 10 people. So, they all read it and kind of gave feedback and got some really good feedback for, what worked and what didn't, and, places where, some of the action felt repetitive, some places that weren't clear based on, phrasing. So, so beta reading is, that like first round of feedback from people. And, I think it's, having done that, I have a few people that I want to keep on my beta reading team, because that's, super valuable to me. And, I want that honest feedback and kind of, see what works for the group. I'm certainly not going to take all the advice, because it's often contradictory advice. Some people like this, they didn't like this, so I need to, it's ultimately me. So, any errors, anything you don't like, don't blame Buddy, don't blame Heather. It's on me. But it's super valuable having that team. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. No. And that's something that I was aware of. There could be some exceptions, but I'm pretty sure that like the higher verbosity was pretty much within Aaron Coppertree's dialogue, because she was that type of person. So I tried to segment that type of those type of references, obscure references, more obscure words, because she's a college student who studies classics and loves etymology and things like that. So I I think I, for the most part, kept that within her dialogue, but I certainly understand if some people were lost at some of that, with as she was speaking, giving these references and stuff like that. Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No.
Just
No,
to share
that's great
a
feedback.
competing perspective, I enjoy having to look up words and terms when I'm reading something. That's part of the learning experience.
Mhm.
I heard someone else tell me that.
Yeah. Okay.
And I use e-readers.
Yep.
The ones I'm using all have the ability for me to highlight a word and look it up.
Yep. Yep.
Which is better than going down here to the dictionary.
Yeah. Right.
Because the dictionary covered that particular topic.
Yep.
So I mean, in some ways, to be able to understand it, but in other ways, I enjoy that part of it. When I read Name Town, I was curious about whether it was your intent or whether I was just superimposing from my own worldview. The extent to which it was a exploration of or commentary on some of the tension we have as a nation and as a state on issues, as a divide between the town and the tribalism that was going on. Were you making a larger commentary, or did I oppose that?
No, I certainly had that in mind as the basis when I was creating the story, and as a writer, I don't want to be like too, I don't like reading books where it's like too heavy-handed, where the author's trying to state a message with too heavy of a hand. So it's like more subtle, just like things are happening, people can interpret what they want. But yeah, certainly that background, I wanted to have like a small town that was facing some sort of identity crisis, which is happening everywhere, and where votes get contentious. I mean, the Cornish library vote got contentious, right? That was happening around the same time that I was writing the book. And where statues are being taken down, and it's just this conversation, honoring history and the heritage, but respecting where that went wrong, respecting more modern values as well, and kind of how do towns reconcile this friction that happened. So that's certainly part of the story, but it's also a fast-paced thriller with dark secrets and all the stuff that goes with that too. So yeah.
I just want to support the concept of having to do research. And what came to mind for me was Dan Brown.
Mm-hmm.
And he's very successful.
Oh, absolutely.
And he focuses often on the conflict between science and religion.
Mm-hmm.
And I found myself having to look up a lot of things while I was reading this book. I
Yeah.
I've learned a lot. So that's, I immediately thought about that. When
Yeah.
People started,
Yeah.
so kudos.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Yeah. As I said, I like to read as or I like to learn as I'm reading. And in books like Dan Brown, you know, I mentioned Neil Stephenson before. I know he's not as well known, but there's books that are like fast-paced thrillers, but like you're learning something on every page, and I love that. And if it's a reference that I don't know, I like to look it up because it furthers that connection that you have to the story. If you can look up and say, oh, that's what they're talking about, and I'll if it's something that I feel like I should have known, I'll be humble and say I did not know that, but now I do, and it just like deepens that connection to the story.
Sometimes it sparks you to go further to investigate as well. Sometimes I'll read historical fiction and be like, how much freedom did the author take with
Yeah.
this? Like, how much did this actually happen? How much did
Yeah.
And then I want to know more about the actual event.
Yeah.
So then I'll dig deeper for that purpose.
Historical fiction is a great example of where you can, for me, I feel like I can get a deeper connection to the time and the people and the place versus like a straight history, because you get that narrative arc that I was talking about earlier, and you can, see how the characters evolve, the trials they face, and then when you see examples of that, you're picturing, this person, not a statistic or a newspaper headline. You're picturing an actual person that went through this.
Their thoughts and
Right. Yeah.
everything about that.
Certainly. Yeah.
You're in
And
their shoes.
yeah. Oh yeah. Like all the small details that you'll get, like their clothing, the food, the weather, all the small details that are, part of the story that help to ground and connect, you as a reader to that experience. Well, cool. Any other questions? Okay. Awesome. This has been a great night. I'll be here if anybody wants me to sign books. I'd be happy to. If anyone wants to purchase a book, I'd be happy with that too. But really, thank you all so much for coming. This is amazing turnout. This is the first talk like this that I've done. I've done like events at different places, but it's like me sitting at a table talking to person one-on-one as they walk by type of thing. So thank you so much for being a trial audience here. So if anybody would like to join my mailing list, you can put your email down, and I'll be up here. Yep.